The red dust swirled around Hannah's boots as she walked through the settlement. 3 years had passed since the colony ship Perseverance crashed on this harsh world called Kepler 4042c. What was supposed to be humanity's greatest adventure had become their greatest nightmare. Hannah pulled her jacket tighter against the cold morning air. As chief engineer of the colony, she carried the weight of 847 lives on her shoulders. Every day brought new problems. Every night brought new fears. The fusion reactors that powered their small settlement were failing, and everyone knew it. She stopped at the edge of the settlement and looked across the vast crimson canyon. The morning light painted the rocky walls in shades of orange and red. Beautiful, but deadly. On the other side of that massive gap lay their salvation. Rich deposits of rare earth elements that could fix their power problems and keep them all alive. But the canyon might as well have been an ocean of fire for all the good those minerals did them here. 15 kilometers wide. That was the distance between life and death for the colonists. 15 kilometers of unstable rock, sudden storms, and ground that shook without warning. Hannah had seen the seismic readings. She knew how the earth moved beneath their feet like a sleeping giant that might wake at any moment. Behind her, the settlement buzzed with morning activity, people going about their daily tasks, trying to maintain some sense of normal life. But Hannah could see the worry in their eyes. They all knew the truth, even if they didn't speak it out loud. 6 months. That was how long their power would last. After that, the heating systems would fail. The water recyclers would stop working. The food processors would go silent. Death would come slowly to Kepler 442c, and it would come for all of them. Tay approached from behind, his heavy footsteps crunching on the rocky ground. The expedition leader looked older than his 35 years. The weight of failed attempts had carved lines around his eyes and turned his black hair gray at the temples. "Any new ideas?" Tay asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Hannah shook her head. Bin ran the numbers again last night. Same result. The ground is too unstable for a permanent bridge. The storms would tear apart anything. We could build with our current materials. They had tried everything. Aerial drones sent across the canyon had been destroyed by electromagnetic storms that appeared without warning. The electromagnetic fields on this planet were unlike anything they had encountered on Earth. They seemed to have a mind of their own, striking down anything that flew too high or carried too much metal. Underground tunnels had seemed promising, until the earthquakes began. What started as small tremors had grown into violent shaking that collapsed their carefully dug passages. Bin, their chief geologist, had explained that the planet's core was still cooling. The ground shifted constantly, making any underground construction impossible. Rope bridges had been their last desperate attempt. They had managed to string cables across the narrowest part of the canyon, but the hurricane-force winds that swept through the gap had snapped their strongest materials like spider silk. 3 good people had died in that attempt, their bodies lost in the depths below. "The council meeting is in an hour," Tay said. "They want answers." Hannah understood. As leaders, they were supposed to have solutions. But sometimes there were problems that couldn't be solved with engineering or determination. Sometimes the universe simply said no, and there was nothing humans could do about it. The settlement stretched behind them in neat rows of prefabricated buildings. What had once housed over 1,000 colonists now sheltered the survivors of the crash. The missing sections told their own story of twisted metal and lives lost when the Perseverance had torn apart in the planet's atmosphere. Children played between the buildings, their laughter a bright sound against the harsh landscape. Hannah watched her 8-year-old daughter Nari running with her friends, still young enough to find joy even in this difficult place. The children gave the adults a reason to keep fighting, keep hoping, keep looking for impossible solutions. But hope was becoming harder to find with each passing day. The power readings that morning had been worse than expected. The fusion reactors were consuming their fuel faster than predicted. The harsh conditions on Kepler 442c seemed to accelerate everything, wearing down both machines and people at an alarming rate. Dr. Sam had presented his latest medical reports the previous week. Malnutrition was becoming common. The hydroponic gardens couldn't produce enough food for everyone, and their stored supplies were running low. People were getting sick more often, taking longer to recover from simple illnesses. The psychological reports were even more troubling. Depression was spreading through the colony like a disease. People were giving up hope, going through the motions of daily life without really living. Some had stopped eating properly. Others spent their days staring across the canyon at the salvation they could never reach. Hannah had studied the mineral surveys until she could recite them from memory. The deposits on the far side of the canyon contained everything they needed: lithium for the batteries, rare earth elements for the electronics, heavy metals for repairs and construction, enough raw materials to not just survive but to build. A thriving colony that could last for generations, all of it sitting just 15 kilometers away, impossible to reach. The worst part was knowing that rescue would eventually come. Earth had promised to send another ship, but space travel took time. Even traveling at maximum speed, the rescue mission wouldn't arrive for another 10 years. By then, there would be nothing left to rescue except bones and empty buildings. As Hannah walked back toward the settlement, she passed the memorial wall, where they honored the colonists who had died in the crash and the failed attempts to cross the canyon. Too many names for such a small community. Too many friends lost to an uncaring universe. But giving up wasn't an option. Not while children still played in the dusty streets. Not while there was still power in the reactors and air in their lungs. Somewhere, somehow, there had to be an answer. There had to be a way across that canyon. Hannah just couldn't see it yet. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the settlement in warm light that made everything look almost normal, almost like home. But home was impossibly far away, and the canyon stretched before them like an open wound in the planet's surface. Time was running out and they all knew it. The twisted metal groaned as Hannah and her salvage team made their way deeper into the wreckage of the Perseverance. 2 weeks had passed since the failed council meeting, where they had admitted they had no solutions. Now they were scavenging for anything useful from the parts of their ship they hadn't explored yet. The cargo bay had been sealed since the crash. Emergency bulkheads had kept this section intact, but getting inside required cutting through 3 layers of damaged hull. Hannah wiped sweat from her forehead as she directed the plasma torch. The metal parted like butter, revealing darkness beyond. "Power up the lights," Hannah called to Jin, one of her engineering assistants. "Let's see what we've got." The lights flickered on, illuminating a vast space filled with cargo containers. Most had been damaged in the crash, their contents scattered or destroyed. But toward the back of the bay, Hannah spotted something that made her heart race. A row of intact cryogenic storage units, their blue lights still blinking steadily. "Those are still active," Jin said, his voice filled with wonder. "After 3 years, they're still running." Hannah approached the units carefully. Each one was the size of a small room designed to preserve biological samples for terraforming projects. She had assumed they were all destroyed in the crash. The fact that some had survived was nothing short of miraculous. The first unit contained plant seeds from Earth: wheat, corn, soybeans. All dead now, the cryogenic system having failed months ago. The second held tree saplings, also lost. But the third unit was different. Its systems hummed with power, and the readout showed everything was functioning perfectly. "What's in this one?" Jin asked, peering at the control panel. Hannah pulled up the inventory on her portable computer. Her eyes widened as she read the manifest. "It's from the Genetic Archive Project, Species Revival Program." The Genetic Archive was humanity's backup plan for lost species. Scientists had collected DNA samples from extinct animals, hoping to bring them back someday on new worlds. Most people thought it was a waste of resources, but the scientists had insisted. Now Hannah was grateful for their stubbornness. She scrolled through the list of samples: dodo birds, Tasmanian tigers, cave bears, and then she stopped. One entry made her breath catch in her throat: mammoth embryo, fully developed and ready for artificial growth chamber. "Jin, get Dr. Som down here right now," Hannah said, her voice barely a whisper. "What is it?" "Just get him, and bring Tay too." An hour later, Dr. Som knelt beside the cryogenic unit with the reverence of a man examining a holy relic. The colony's chief biologist was a small, quiet man who rarely showed emotion, But now his hands trembled as he read the genetic profile. "This is incredible," Dr. Som said. "This isn't just any mammoth, it's been genetically enhanced for extreme environments. Look at these specifications." Tay leaned closer to read over the doctor's shoulder. "Enhanced how?" "Stronger bones, thicker skin, enhanced lung capacity for thin atmospheres, and most importantly, improved neural pathways for navigation and terrain assessment." Dr. Som looked up at them with wide eyes. This creature was designed to survive on worlds like this one. Hana felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. How big would it get? Dr. Som checked his portable scanner. Full grown, this mammoth would weigh about 12 tons, height at the shoulder 4 meters. It's been designed to carry heavy loads across difficult terrain. The implications hit all three of them at the same time. A creature that could navigate dangerous ground, strong enough to carry equipment, smart enough to find safe paths. It was like finding the perfect solution to their impossible problem. But Tay was always practical. "What would it take to grow this thing?" "Doctor." Som was quiet for a long moment, running calculations in his head. "We'd need to use the medical bay's artificial growth chamber. The process would take about 4 months with accelerated development, but there's a cost." "What kind of cost?" "Power. Growing a creature this size this quickly would consume 40% of our remaining energy reserves." The hope in Hana's chest turned cold. 40% of their power for a gamble that might not work. If the mammoth died, or couldn't help them cross the canyon, they would have shortened their survival time by months. "There's something else," Dr. Som continued, his voice troubled. "The accelerated growth process. It's never been tested on a creature this complex. There could be side effects we don't understand." Tay ran his hands through his gray hair. "So, we're talking about using almost half our remaining power to create a creature that might not survive, might not help us, and might have unknown health problems." "That's about right," Dr. Som admitted. The three of them stood in silence, staring at the cryogenic unit. Inside that container was either their salvation or their doom. The embryo of a creature that had walked the earth thousands of years ago, now potentially the key to humanity's survival on a distant world. "What about the ethics?" Hana asked quietly. "Is it right to create a life just to use it?" This question had been bothering her since she first read the manifest. They would be bringing a thinking, feeling creature into existence for one purpose: to help them survive. It felt wrong somehow, like they were playing God with forces they didn't understand. Dr. Som nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that too. But this embryo was created for exactly this purpose: to help humans establish colonies on new worlds. In a way, we'd be fulfilling its intended function. And if we don't try this, we all die anyway," Tay added grimly. That was the harsh reality they couldn't escape. In 6 months, maybe less, their power would fail. The heating systems would shut down. The water recyclers would stop working. Everyone in the colony would die slowly and painfully. At least this way, they had a chance. "I need to call a colony meeting," Tay said finally. "This decision affects everyone. They should have a say." Hana agreed, but she already knew what the decision would be. When faced with certain death or uncertain hope, humans always chose hope. It was what made them human. The meeting was held that evening in the main assembly hall. Tai explained the situation clearly and honestly. The mammoth could be their salvation, but growing it would cost them precious power and time they couldn't afford to waste. The debate lasted for hours. Some colonists worried about the ethics of creating life for their own purposes. Others questioned whether a single animal could really solve their transportation problems. A few suggested they should save their power and hope for rescue instead. But in the end, the vote was clear: they would grow the mammoth. As the colonists filed out of the meeting, Hana remained behind with Dr. Som and Tay. Tomorrow they would begin the process of bringing an extinct creature back to life, a creature that would either save them all or consume their last hope. "No pressure," Tay said with dark humor. Dr. Som was already making notes on his computer. "I'll need to prepare the growth chamber. Check all the nutrient systems. This has to be perfect." Hana nodded. She understood the weight of what they were attempting. They were about to play with forces beyond their understanding, gambling everything on the hope that an ancient creature could solve a modern problem. But sometimes hope was all humans had left, and sometimes hope was enough. The artificial growth chamber hummed with quiet power in the medical bay. Inside the transparent container, something amazing was happening. What had started as a tiny embryo 4 months ago was now a creature the size of a small building. Hana pressed her hand against the warm glass and watched the mammoth sleep. Even lying down, he was taller than she was. Thick brown fur covered his massive body, and his trunk curled peacefully against his chest. They had named him Goliath, and the name fit perfectly. His vital signs are perfect, Dr. Sam said, checking the monitors. Heart rate steady, brain activity normal. The accelerated growth process worked better than I hoped. June, the colony's animal specialist, made notes on his tablet. He had been studying mammoth behavior for months, preparing for this moment. According to the historical data, mammoths were intelligent creatures. They lived in family groups and showed strong emotional bonds. Will he accept us as his family? Hana asked. We're about to find out. The plan was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. They would wake Goliath and begin his training immediately. Time was running short. The colony's power reserves were down to 3 months, maybe less. Every day counted now. Dr. Sam initiated the wake-up sequence. The chamber's temperature began to rise slowly. Nutrients flowed through tubes connected to the mammoth's body. His breathing grew deeper and stronger. Then Goliath opened his eyes. They were brown eyes, warm and intelligent. The mammoth looked around the medical bay with curiosity rather than fear. When his gaze fell on Hana, he made a soft rumbling sound deep in his chest. He's trying to communicate, June said excitedly. That's a greeting call. Over the next week, Goliath proved to be everything they had hoped for and more. The genetic enhancements had given him abilities that amazed everyone who worked with him. His sense of balance was perfect, even on unstable ground. His trunk could detect tiny changes in air pressure that warned of approaching storms. Most remarkably, he seemed to understand that the humans needed his help. Hana spent hours each day with Goliath, getting him used to human contact. The mammoth was gentle despite his enormous size. He would lower his massive head so she could reach him, and his trunk would explore her hands with delicate curiosity. He likes you, June observed during one training session. The feeling is mutual, Hana replied, scratching behind Goliath's ear. The mammoth made a pleased rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground, but it was Nari who formed the strongest bond with Goliath. Hana's 8-year-old daughter showed no fear of the massive creature. She would sit beside him for hours, reading books aloud or simply talking about her day. Goliath would listen with patient attention, his intelligent eyes following her movements. He understands more than we think, Nari told her mother one evening. He knows we're in trouble, he wants to help. Hana wanted to dismiss her daughter's words as childish imagination, but she couldn't. There was something in Goliath's eyes that suggested deep understanding. The mammoth watched the humans with the same concern they showed for each other. Training progressed faster than anyone expected. Goliath learned to wear the special harness they had designed for him. He practiced walking on unstable surfaces, his massive feet finding solid footing where humans would slip and fall. Most importantly, he learned to carry heavy loads without losing his balance. His spatial awareness is incredible, Jun reported to the Colony Council. He can sense weak spots in the ground before stepping on them. It's like he has a built-in geological survey system. But Bin, the chief geologist, had been studying the canyon crossing point with growing concern. The narrowest section is still 800 meters across. The natural bridge formation could support his weight, but barely, and that's assuming the rock doesn't shift while he's crossing. The plan they developed was ambitious and dangerous. Goliath would make multiple trips across the canyon, carrying essential mining equipment and personnel to the far side. Once, they established a mining operation. They could extract the rare earth elements needed to repair their power systems. Everything depended on one mammoth, and his willingness to risk his life for creatures he had known for only a few months. As training continued, Dr. Sam made a disturbing discovery during Goliath's routine health checkup. The accelerated growth process had worked perfectly, but it came with a hidden cost. The Mammoth's cellular structure showed signs of premature aging. "How long does he have?" Hana asked quietly when Dr. Som explained the situation. "Weeks. Maybe. A month or two at most. The accelerated development has compressed his entire lifespan. He's growing old at the same rapid pace he grew large." The news hit the colonists hard. They had grown attached to Goliath, and now they learned he was dying. Worse, they were asking him to risk his shortened life to save theirs. "Does he know?" Nari asked when Hana explained the situation to her. Hana looked across the training ground where Goliath was practicing with his harness. The mammoth moved with quiet dignity, never complaining about the heavy loads or difficult tasks. "I think he does, sweetheart. I think he's always known." The ethical questions that had troubled them when they first discovered the embryo came back with renewed force. They had created a life, formed bonds with an intelligent creature, and now they were asking him to sacrifice himself for their survival. But Goliath seemed to have made his own decision. During training sessions, he showed increasing determination. When presented with obstacles, he found ways around them. When given tasks, he completed them with methodical precision. It was as if he understood the urgency of their situation. 3 weeks before the planned crossing, a major storm system appeared on the weather sensors. It would reach their area in 10 days, bringing with it the electromagnetic disturbances and violent winds that made canyon crossing impossible. "This might be our only chance," Tay announced at the emergency meeting. "If we wait for the storm to pass, we lose another 2 weeks. Our power situation won't allow for delays." Dr. Som checked Goliath's latest health readings. "He's strong enough now, but each day he gets a little weaker. If we're going to do this, it has to be soon." The final preparations began immediately. The mining equipment was packed into specially designed containers that would fit Goliath's harness system. The crossing team was selected. Hana would go first with Goliath to establish the route, followed by Tai and a small team of miners. As the departure date approached, the mood in the colony grew tense. Everyone understood that this was their last chance. If Goliath couldn't make the crossing, or if something went wrong during the mining operation, the colony would die with their remaining power. On the night before the crossing, Nari sat beside Goliath in his enclosure. The mammoth had grown quieter in recent days, conserving his energy for the challenge ahead, but his eyes still held that warm intelligence that had captivated everyone who met him. "You don't have to do this," Nari whispered to him. "We could find another way." Goliath lowered his massive head and gently touched Nari's shoulder with his trunk. The gesture was so human in its compassion that it brought tears to her eyes. Hana watched from the doorway, understanding something profound about the creature they had brought into existence. Goliath wasn't just helping them because he had been trained to do so. He was choosing to help them because he had formed the same bonds with the colonists that they had formed with him. He had become part of their family, and families protected each other. Tomorrow would bring the greatest test of that bond. Tomorrow, Goliath would attempt the impossible crossing that would either save them all or claim the life of the gentlest giant any of them had ever known. The storm was coming. Time was running out, and everything depended on one mammoth's courage and the love he shared with the humans who had given him life. The morning air was cold and still as Hana checked Goliath's harness one final time. The massive mammoth stood patiently while she adjusted the straps that would carry their hopes across the canyon. His breath came out in white clouds, and his intelligent brown eyes watched the horizon where dark storm clouds were gathering. "Weather station shows we have 6 hours before the storm hits," Tay said, his voice tight with worry. "After that, crossing becomes impossible for at least 2 weeks." Hana nodded and patted Goliath's thick fur. The mammoth had been quieter than usual that morning, as if he understood the importance of what lay ahead. His massive feet shuffled nervously on the rocky ground, but his eyes remained calm and determined. June made final adjustments to the equipment packs strapped to Goliath's sides. Each container held vital mining equipment that would allow them to extract the rare earth elements they desperately needed. The quantum resonator, their most important piece of equipment, was secured in a specially padded case near Goliath's shoulders. "Remember, if anything goes wrong, you drop everything and get yourself to safety," Hana told Goliath, speaking to him as if he were human. We can replace equipment, we can't replace you. The mammoth made a soft rumbling sound and touched Hana's shoulder gently with his trunk. It was a gesture they had shared many times during training, but today it felt like a goodbye. The natural bridge stretched across the canyon like a stone finger pointing toward salvation. 800 meters of cracked rock and unstable ledges. From their position on the canyon rim, it looked impossibly narrow and fragile. But Goliath had crossed it successfully during their test runs with lighter loads. Today would be different. Today he carried not just equipment but the survival of every person in the colony. I'm going with him, Hana announced, slinging her pack over her shoulder. Absolutely not, Tay protested. If something goes wrong, we can't lose both of you. He trusts me. I've been with him through every training session. He'll be calmer if I'm there. Hana's voice left no room for argument. Besides, someone needs to establish the mining camp on the other side. Tay knew better than to argue with Hana when she had made up her mind. He helped her climb onto the special saddle they had built behind Goliath's massive shoulders. From that height, the canyon looked even more terrifying. See you on the other side, June called out, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Goliath began his descent to the bridge with careful, measured steps. His enhanced senses tested each foothold before committing his full weight. Rocks that looked solid crumbled under the pressure of his massive feet, but somehow he always found stable ground. The first 100 meters went smoothly. Goliath moved with the grace of a creature born for this kind of terrain. His trunk swept ahead of him, testing the air and the ground, warning him of weak spots before he reached them. But halfway across, the bridge began to change. The ancient stone formation had been weakened by centuries of weather and seismic activity. Under Goliath's weight, hairline cracks began to spread through the rock. He's too heavy, Hana whispered into her radio. The bridge is breaking apart. Behind them, she could see Tay and the others watching through binoculars. There was no way to help from that distance, no way to turn back. The only choice was to keep moving forward. Goliath sensed the danger too. His steps became even more careful, his massive body moving with extraordinary precision. When a section of rock crumbled away beneath his left foot, he shifted his weight instantly, finding purchase on a ledge barely wide enough to support him. They reached the other side, just as a major section of the bridge collapsed behind them. Goliath stood on solid ground, breathing heavily but unharmed. The first crossing was complete, but now they were stranded on the far side of the canyon with no way back. We did it, Hana said, her voice shaking with relief. She radioed back to the colony. Landing site is secure. Beginning setup of mining camp. Over the next 2 weeks, Goliath made 17 more crossings. Each trip became more dangerous as the bridge continued to deteriorate under his repeated passages. The Mammoth adapted to each new challenge, finding alternate routes when sections collapsed, leaping across gaps that would have been impossible for any other creature. With each crossing, he brought more equipment and more people. The mining operation on the far side of the canyon grew from a single tent to a functioning camp. They extracted their first samples of rare earth elements, enough to prove the deposits were everything they had hoped for. But the crossings were taking their toll on Goliath. His breathing became more labored. His steps grew slower and more careful. The accelerated aging process was catching up with him, and everyone could see it. Nari noticed the changes before anyone else. During their daily video calls across the canyon, she watched Goliath with the sharp eyes of a child who loved him deeply. "He's getting tired, isn't he?" she asked her mother during one call. Hana looked at Goliath, who was resting after his latest crossing. The mammoth's massive sides rose and fell with each breath, and there was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Yes, sweetheart, he's getting tired. But he won't stop, will he? No. He won't stop." The 18th crossing was scheduled to be the final one. Goliath would carry the last piece of critical equipment, the quantum resonator that would power their mining operation for years to come. After that, they would have enough resources to survive until rescue arrived. The morning of the final crossing brought troubling news. The seismic sensors were showing increased activity throughout the canyon. The ground was becoming unstable, possibly triggered by Goliath's repeated crossings. "We should wait," Ben advised over the radio. "The readings are getting worse." But waiting wasn't an option. The storm system that had been threatening for days was finally approaching. Dark clouds filled the sky and the wind was already picking up. If they didn't make this crossing today, they might not get another chance for weeks. Dr. Sam checked Goliath's vital signs once more. His heart rate is elevated, breathing is shallow. He's operating on determination alone now. Goliath seemed to understand that this would be his final journey. He stood perfectly still while they loaded the quantum resonator onto his harness, the weight of their future settling onto his massive shoulders. Halfway across the bridge, disaster struck. A seismic event, stronger than any they had recorded, shook the entire canyon. The bridge began to collapse in sections, creating gaps that even Goliath couldn't cross. The Mammoth found himself trapped on a narrow ledge, the path ahead blocked by a 5-meter gap where the bridge had fallen away. Behind him, more sections were crumbling into the canyon depths. The quantum resonator on his back represented their last hope, but there was no way forward and no way back. Through her binoculars, Hannah watched in horror as Goliath surveyed his impossible situation. The Mammoth could drop the equipment and try to save himself, but they both knew what that would mean for the colony. Instead, Goliath did something that would haunt Hannah for the rest of her life. He looked directly at her across the canyon, his intelligent eyes meeting hers one final time. In that gaze, she saw understanding, acceptance, and something that could only be called love. Then Goliath began to move forward, step by impossible step, toward a gap that couldn't be crossed and a fate that couldn't be avoided. The storm was coming, the bridge was collapsing, and their gentle giant was about to make the ultimate sacrifice for the family he had chosen to save. The wind howled across the canyon as Goliath stood on the narrow ledge, surrounded by crumbling stone and impossible choices. The storm had arrived early, bringing with it the fury that made this planet so deadly. Lightning flashed in the dark, clouds above, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Hannah pressed the binoculars against her eyes so hard they hurt. From the colony side of the canyon, she could see every detail of Goliath's desperate situation. The Mammoth was trapped on a piece of rock barely wide enough for his massive body. Ahead of him, a 5-meter gap where the bridge had collapsed. Behind him, more sections falling into the depths below. "Can we get a rope to him?" Tay shouted, over the growing wind. "Too far," John replied, his voice breaking. "Nothing we have will reach that distance." The quantum resonator still hung in its protective case on Goliath's harness. Without that device, their mining operation would fail. Without the mining operation, the colony would die when their power ran out in 2 months. Everything they had, worked for, everything they had hoped for, balanced on the back of one dying mammoth trapped on a ledge in a storm. Through the wind and rain, Hannah heard something that made her heart stop. Goliath was calling to her. Not the distressed trumpet of a frightened animal, but the soft rumbling greeting he used when he was happy to see her. Even facing certain death, he was trying to comfort her. "I'm sorry," Hannah whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her across the canyon. "I'm so sorry we asked this of you." But Goliath wasn't looking for pity or rescue. The great mammoth had already made his decision. He began to move with careful, deliberate purpose. Instead of trying to save himself, he started repositioning the equipment on his back. "What is he doing?" Dr. Sam asked, watching through his own binoculars. Hannah realized what was happening and felt her breath catch. "He's securing the resonator, making sure it won't be damaged when he falls." The mammoth worked with methodical precision despite the storm raging around him. He used his trunk to adjust the straps, ensuring the quantum resonator was positioned where it would survive the impact. Every movement was calculated, every decision made with the careful thought of a creature who understood exactly what he was doing. He could drop it and try to jump back, Tay said desperately. He might make it, but they all knew that wasn't true. The gap behind Goliath was already too wide, and more of the bridge was collapsing every minute. Even if he abandoned the equipment, he couldn't save himself. So Goliath chose a different path. The mammoth began to move forward toward the impossible gap. Not rushing, not panicking, but walking with the same steady determination he had shown. Throughout all his crossings, his massive feet found purchase on stones that looked too small to support him. His trunk swept ahead, testing each step before committing his weight. At the edge of the gap, Goliath stopped. For a moment, Hana thought, he might turn back, might try to find another way. But the mammoth was studying the broken bridge with the same careful attention he had always given to difficult terrain. Then he began to do something extraordinary. Instead of trying to leap across the gap, Goliath started breaking off pieces of the ledge beneath his feet. Large chunks of stone that he pushed forward with his massive head, letting them fall into the gap. Each piece he dislodged made his own position more dangerous, but he continued working with single-minded purpose. He's building a foundation, Ben whispered in amazement. He's using the falling stones to fill the gap. The process was destroying the ledge Goliath stood on, but he kept working. Push another stone forward, watch it fall into place, test the stability with his trunk, then push another piece. He was creating a crude bridge from the rubble of the old one, but each stone he moved brought him closer to falling himself. The rain was coming down harder now, making the rocks slippery and dangerous. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that shook the entire canyon. But Goliath never stopped working. His massive body moved with the patience of a creature who understood that some things were worth dying for. When he had pushed enough stones into the gap to create a rough path, Goliath positioned himself carefully. The ledge beneath him was barely holding together now, weakened by his own efforts to save others. He looked across the canyon one final time, his intelligent eyes finding Hana through the storm. In that look, she saw everything he wanted to say. Goodbye. Thank you for caring about me. Take care of Nari. Remember me. Then Goliath stepped forward onto his improvised bridge. The mammoth's weight was too much for the loose stones he had arranged. They shifted and cracked under his massive feet, but they held just long enough. Step by step, Goliath crossed the gap he had created, each movement causing more stones to fall away behind him. Halfway across, the makeshift bridge began to collapse completely. But Goliath was ready. As the stones gave way beneath him, he threw himself forward with the last of his strength, using his body as a living bridge to span the final gap. The great mammoth landed heavily on the far side of the canyon, but the impact sent cracks through the landing area. The rock formation couldn't support his weight and the shock of his desperate leap. As Goliath struggled to stand, the ground beneath him began to give way, but the quantum resonator was safe. In his final moments, Goliath used his trunk to push the precious device onto solid ground, away from the collapsing ledge. The equipment that would save the colony rolled to safety, just as the mammoth fell into the canyon depths below. Goliath died as he had lived among them, in silence, without complaint, thinking of others until the very end. The storm raged for 3 more days. When it finally passed, the rescue team found the quantum resonator exactly where Goliath had placed it, undamaged and ready to power their mining operation. The mammoth's body had created a foundation of broken stone that actually stabilized the remaining bridge structure. In death, Goliath had given them everything: the equipment to survive, a bridge that would last for generations, and a memory of sacrifice that would inspire them all. 6 months later, the mining operation was producing enough rare earth elements to not only repair their power systems, but to expand them. The colony grew from 847 desperate survivors to a thriving community of over 1,000 people. Ships began arriving from Earth, carrying new colonists who walked across the bridge that Goliath's sacrifice had made possible. Nari, now 9 years old, led the dedication ceremony for the Goliath Memorial Bridge. She had grown taller in the months since the mammoth's death, but her eyes still held the sadness of losing her gentle giant friend. He didn't have to save us, she told the gathered crowd. But he chose to. Because that's what families do for each other. The memorial stone bore a simple inscription: Goliath, Earth's gift to the stars. He died in silence, but his final steps built the bridge that saved us all. Hannah, now the colony's chief administrator, placed her hand on the memorial stone and made a quiet promise. We will remember. We will be worthy of what you gave us. Years passed. The colony became a city. The city became humanity's first permanent foothold beyond the solar system. Millions of people eventually crossed Goliath's bridge, each one walking over the foundation he had created with his life. And in the records of that great city, in the stories told to children, in the memory of everyone who knew him, lived the truth about one mammoth who proved that the greatest strength didn't come from size or power, but from the choice to put others before yourself. The mammoth had died in silence, but his final steps echoed through eternity, carrying the message that love and sacrifice could overcome any obstacle, bridge any gap, and turn certain death into lasting hope. Goliath's bridge still stands today, a testament to what one gentle giant accomplished when he chose to save a family that had chosen to love him in return.